This is absolutely one of the craziest stories that I've ever seen in my life. And thankfully, we have some new information, crazy updates on this off duty pilot, Joseph Emerson. He's the guy who tried to take down the Alaska Airlines flight that he was flying in the jump seat in the cockpit on. And there were so many questions about this. Like, what happened to the cockpit? We're going to answer that. What happened in the back of the plane? Nobody was even talking about that. And why did this guy do it? Why did he freak out and try to shut down the engines of this flight, leading to him being charged with over 80 counts of attempted murder? All of those questions answered in this video, so stick with me. First, though, I want to share with you the audio from air traffic control when they were talking to this flight, Horizon 2059. And they were basically just outlining what had just happened in the cockpit with this guy. Here we go.
When able, you could let me know the threat level. Okay, I'll just give you a heads up. We've got the guy that tried to shut the engines down out of the cockpit, and he doesn't sound like he's causing any issue in the back right now. I think he's subdued. Other than that, yeah, we want law enforcement as soon as we get on the ground and parked.
All right, we want law enforcement as soon as we get on the ground and parked, he says. Now let's go over to what really happened on this flight. And some of this is just jaw-dropping, so stick with me. Here we go. On Sunday, October 22nd, 2023 at 6:11 p.m., Port of Portland police officers responded to a report of an inbound aircraft, Horizon Airlines. I think it's related to Alaska Airlines. Flight number 2059 flying to Portland International Airport due to an in-flight disturbance. The initial reporting from the police dispatch was that an off-duty pilot by the name of Joseph David Emerson was sitting in the cockpit jump seat of the aircraft and attempted to shut down the engines during the flight. Responding police units interviewed two pilots. Pilot number one, we're going to hear from both of these, and they got different perspective on this. Pilot number one was flying the aircraft and said prior to this evening he had never met Emerson. During the initial stages of the flight, Pilot 1 said there was zero indication of anything wrong, and Emerson engaged both pilots in casual conversation about different types of aircraft. Pilot 1 advised that the incident occurred approximately halfway between Astoria, Oregon, and Portland, Oregon, while the aircraft headed south. While sitting in the cockpit jump seat, Emerson said, "I'm not okay." Pilot 2 turned and observed Emerson reaching up and grabbing the red fire handles and pulling them down. So he gets up in the cockpit and he's pulling down these emergency handles, which will shut off the engines. Obviously, that is bad. That is terrible. This effectively activated the aircraft fire suppression system used to extinguish aircraft engine fires. Pilot 1 added the activation of the fire suppression system would shut off the fuel supply to the engines. Pilot 1 grabbed Emerson's wrist while Pilot 2 declared an in-flight emergency at that time. Pilot 1 said Emerson initially resisted him and he physically engaged for a duration he estimated to be between 25 and 30 seconds. So they're fighting. And the cockpit's not a big area, obviously. So they're fighting in this close quarters. Emerson quickly settled down. Pilot 1 asked Emerson to leave the cockpit, and Emerson exited the cockpit. Pilot 1 estimated that from the time Emerson told the pilots he was not okay until Emerson exited the cockpit was about 90 seconds. This whole incident lasted about 90 seconds. Now we're going to get to Pilot 2's perspective before we go follow Emerson to the back of the plane where he's causing more chaos. Pilot 2 advised that at the beginning of the flight, Emerson engaged in casual conversation with them about the weather. Emerson told the pilots he had been working for the airline for 10 years. Then during the flight, Pilot 2 observed Emerson throw his headset across the cockpit and announce, "I am not okay." Pilot 2 observed Emerson grab both red engine shutoff handles. Pilot 2 advised that Emerson had to be wrestled with for several seconds before he stopped it. Pilot 2 declared an in-flight emergency, turned the autopilot off, changed the aircraft's course to fly to Portland. Once Emerson exited the cockpit, the pilots then secured the cockpit door at that time. Pilot 2 advised the interviewing police officer Emerson was unable to pull the red handles down. This part's important. He couldn't pull them down all the way and fully activate the engine shutoff because they were wrestling with him. If Emerson had successfully pulled the red engine shutoff handles all the way down, it would have shut off the hydraulics and the fuel to the engine, turning the aircraft into a glider within seconds. That's how close they were to both those engines being off in that flight. The pilot and the co-pilot on this flight were able to subdue this guy enough so that he didn't shut down those engines, but it was that close. All right, let's continue here. Pilot 2 said Emerson's actions interfered with the ability to operate the aircraft. Obviously, that's the case. Responding officers interviewed several flight attendants. Now we're going to figure out what happened in the back of the plane, and nobody's even talking about this. During the flight attendants receive a call from the cockpit. So they say, we got a guy losing it up here. We got to get him out. Emerson was observed peacefully walking to the back of the aircraft. Emerson told one flight attendant, "I just got kicked out of the flight deck." He said, "You need to cuff me right now or it's going to be bad." The flight attendant sat Emerson in a flight attendant seat in the back of the aircraft and placed cuffs on his wrists. During the flight's descent, Emerson turned towards an emergency exit door and tried to grab the handle. We didn't even know this before. Now he tries to open the emergency exit on the flight. A flight attendant stopped Emerson by placing her hands on top of Emerson's hands. The flight attendant engaged Emerson in conversation to distract him from trying to do this. He started making statements like, "I messed everything up," and he tried to kill everybody. The flight attendant noticed Emerson taking out his cell phone, and he appeared to be texting on the phone. Emerson was heard saying he just put 84 people's lives at risk, including his own. Now we get down to the meat of it, right? Now they interview Emerson himself, and this is where he tells us why he freaked out and tried to take down this flight, and it is a doozy. Responding police officers interviewed Emerson. The officer learned he was seated in a flight attendant seat in the back of the aircraft. He had a pair of flex handcuffs around his hands in front, and he was secured by a seat harness. Officers detained him and placed him in a patrol vehicle, read him his Miranda rights, and he agreed to speak with officers. Emerson's police interview was recorded. He advised that he believed he was having a nervous breakdown and he had not slept in 40 hours. Emerson said he was an employee of Alaska Airlines and had been a pilot since 2001. He said he felt dehydrated and tired. He confirmed that he sat in the cockpit during the flight. He said, "I didn't feel okay. It seemed like the pilots weren't paying attention to what was going on. It didn't seem right," he said. And then he said, "Yeah, I pulled both emergency shutoff handles because I thought I was dreaming and I just want to wake up." He denied taking any medication, but he said approximately 6 months ago, he became depressed. The officer and Emerson talked about the use of psychedelic mushrooms, and he said it was his first time taking mushrooms. So this dude went on a flight where he was in the jump seat, and he took mushrooms, and that's what caused him to freak out and say, "It's not all right, it's not okay, I'm not okay," and try to both stop the engines with the emergency pull cords and open the emergency exit on the back of the flight. And when he clears his head of all of these shrooms, he wakes up to over 80 charges of attempted murder, and I'm sure a whole lot more. That's what is in the affidavit that has just been released from the Oregon District Court. Insane. What do you think about this guy? Should he go behind bars for a long time for the crimes that he's committed here? Was this just a horrible accident and you think nothing really happened, so everybody should just be fine and move on with it? What do you think the appropriate punishment is for this? And does this show that we're at more danger than we think we are when we're on these flights? Somebody in the cockpit could just freak out and pull those cords and we're in big trouble? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching. And if you want more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and we'll see you next time.